Hades here, welcome to the second part in my head study series. In this one we'll be looking at the facial features, the eyes, nose, mouth and ears. Alright, let's waste no time, starting with the eyes. As you can see here, I think of the eye in these four parts. Most important thing to notice is that the lids have thickness, and that they wrap over a spherical form, which is the eyeball. Knowing this will make sure you know where to put your lights and shadow when you add value. In your typical lighting, the thickness of the bottom lid will be facing the light, but the thickness of the top lid won't. And not accounting for eyelashes, you'll see artists use heavier line weight for the upper eyelid when drawing eyes to indicate the light and shadows. Unless they add makeup to their character, like eyeliner or something, then that'll be reason to make the bottom lid line weight thicker. The top lid overlaps the bottom lid on the far side. It's quite subtle, but look out for it. And I think as long as you can draw contour lines over a sphere, you should be able to wrap eyelids over an eyeball. At the top, I've shown a basic construction of the eye. Start with the sphere, add the rhythms of the eye, then wrap the lids over the eyes. We'll look at some studies in different angles in a moment. And the rhythm of the eyes are what you'll use to draw the lids over the eyeball. You can use that first or second one. I think the second one might be a bit more realistic, but I prefer the second one. And be sure to make the eyes asymmetrical. You want to have this diagonal line sweeping over the eyeball. In part 1, we looked at the structure of the skull, and as you'd expect, the eyeball sits inside the eye socket, with the brow ridge acting like a roof, protecting the eye. This next bit won't be important for most of us, but the eye isn't completely round, the cornea sticks out, and you can even see it distorting the upper eyelid, but unless you're drawing the eye real close, this doesn't really matter. However, you should know that the cornea takes up about half the open space, the exposed part of the eyeball. And in profile, you'll see the top lid overhanging the bottom lid. Okay, let's break down this photo and see what we can learn. The eyebrow hair growth starts below the brow ridge and makes its way up and around above the eye bridge to the side of the head. And that's why we can't see the whole eyebrow in this view, because it's wrapping around to the side of the head. And when drawing eyebrows, think of the overall shape and then add hairs. A very common mistake that I see when drawing faces in this 3/4 angle is showing the whole far eye. We shouldn't be able to see all of the far eye. As you can see here, we can't see the far corner because it's being blocked by the eyeball. Even in stylization, keep this in mind. It's impossible for me to cover all eye variations. It's really up to you to study as much as you can. But a big thing to note is the shape of the eyes and how much of the top lid can be seen. The corners of the eye on the right are sharp compared to the left, and again notice the thickness of the eyelids that can be seen on the left. For practice, I've chosen to study from Choi's Eye Study, and this is just because finding high-res photos of eyes in various angles isn't very easy, and the eyelashes can obstruct your view of the forms of the eye. Choi's been teaching anatomy for quite some time, from what I've found, and she's an industry professional, so I feel comfortable studying her work. I also did some studies of the bark plates, the eye ones, and links to these will be down in the description. So I'm starting off by filling the page with circles or spheres. As I mentioned earlier, I add the rhythms of the eye and then build from there, remembering that you're wrapping the lids over the eyeballs. So I'm not just copying Choi's work, I'm trying to reconstruct it myself. Just mindlessly copying it won't really help. If you understand these, I think you should be in good shape. And for those curious about eyelashes, the growth starts at the edge of the eyelids. Now onto the nose. It can get quite complex, but we can simplify it down into these planes here. And then we can separate it into 3 parts. And it's that bottom part where most of the character of the nose is. And the way I like to construct the nose is with these 3 circular shapes, and then I sort of carve the shapes of the nose from there. From a side view, you'll see this bump on the nose sometimes, and that's where the nasal bone is. Here are the basic parts of the nose. Should be easy to remember, I think. A common mistake when drawing or painting nostrils is to just put circular holes on the wings. If you want the nostrils to look believable, make sure the opening is across the wing and the septum. And just a quick note here, I normally don't use 100% black when I'm drawing. I feel like the pure black is just a bit too strong, almost like a highlight. And so when I'm drawing, I usually use a 90% black or an 80% black. The planes of the nose can get quite complex. If you look at the Asaro head, you can just see just how complex the nose is, and it's quite overwhelming. I remember watching one of Proko's videos thinking the nose was simple, and then Proko throws this complex planes of the nose in the video. And while it is useful, most of the time you're not going to have to worry about that, I don't think. I only refer to it if I see in the reference these clear planes, but most of the time the nose is quite round. Now for some photo studies. So I'm quickly breaking down the reference using the shapes we just saw, and I want to find the circular shapes and how they relate in perspective, where the bottom plane is, and what the shape of the nostrils are. And then once I've done that, I'll attempt to redraw it. I'll try and limit myself to 10 minutes. I usually start fairly messy, and then lightly erase, and then draw a cleaner version on top. And you can see here, I'm not using a single value for the nostrils. I've created a gradient, which looks more natural in my opinion, because it indicates the light. And I'm not necessarily using the light in the photo, but I'm just using it as a guide. For anyone curious, I'm using a hard round opacity brush, but the shape of the brush is elliptical with the tilt settings on. Here we have the nose in almost profile view. The nasal bone sticks out ever so slightly. It's kind of hard to tell. And again, I want to find those circular shapes and the bottom plane and the shape of the nostrils. Feel free to do these with me. Most of the references will be in the description down below. And I'm lightly indicating some of those planes that we saw earlier. I think once you do enough of these, you'll have a much easier time when it comes to simplifying. You can clearly see the side planes in this reference. In this reference, you can see a lot of those angular shape planes. I'm still using circles, but I'll just carve out the shapes like I mentioned earlier. You can see I've been using these trapezium shapes for the nose bridge, which you won't always see, but with this reference you can, right? Look at the highlights on the nose and the direction it goes in, out and then in. Sometimes you'll just see a straight line. Onto the mouth. Just like the nose, I like constructing the lips from these three circular shapes. And those make up the main masses of the lips, 1, 2, and 3. And so when the shape of the lips changes, you want to think about maintaining the volume. It's common for people to draw the lips in a neutral position, but if you choose to study facial expressions, which I hope you do, keep this in mind. The face is curved, and so when you're drawing the lips, be sure to think about drawing the lips over a curved surface. If you remember from part 1, the maxilla is round, but the lips aren't as round as the maxilla, but it's still there. And now here I'm showing a basic construction of the lips, starting with those three circular shapes, and then adding the shapes of the lips, and then lightly erase and use more organic curves. And for all of these constructions that I'm showing in this video, eventually you should be able to construct them just from the shapes once you get good enough and not worry about drawing these circles all the time. Let's make some observations here. Try not to think of just the lips. Think of the surrounding area too. The muzzle, which protrudes out of the face. Above the center of the lips, we have the philtrum, which can either be deep or shallow, varies from person to person. At the corner of the mouth, we have this occlusion shadow. Make sure to add this to your drawings by using some darker line weight. And you can see the top lip almost looks like it's tucking into that corner, the way it curves. Because of the curvature of the mouth, The corner on the far side is just barely visible from this angle. I've added a center line in green and a few contour lines over the lips, and notice that concave area below the middle of the lips and how it's convex on either side. Right, and so in that concave area, you'll normally see a shadow being formed there. And just to make it extra clear, you can see the curvature of the mouth here. Okay, on to some studies. Start by finding those three masses. The mouth is open here, so I've traced over the shape. I really like to find shapes first and rely on form if I need to afterwards. See how I'm using these T-lines to show dimension on the upper lip, where that mass is that I showed earlier in the notes. Even if I can't really see an overlap in the reference, I'll just add it to my drawing anyway, because it adds dimension. If you want to know more about T-lines and how they relate to the lips here, definitely check out Cynix's video on lips, and he talks about it over there. You can see the teeth here, and I've indicated them lightly. In a moment you'll see me do an example of an open smile, and I'll talk about teeth a bit more over there. But you definitely don't want to outline every single tooth unless you're going for a creepy look. Here we have a top-down 3/4 view. It's a bit difficult to see what's going on at the far corner, but I keep in mind the curvature of the face and the volume and form of the lips. And if you need to, I definitely recommend drawing a center line on your reference. That'll really help you see how much foreshortening is going on. And just like before, you can see me using T-lines and that dark shadow at the corner of the mouth, which makes it look like there's a very slight smile. Side view this time. Those masses on the bottom lid overlap, and again T-lines to show the overlap on that top mass. And I usually build with straights. I find that useful, and then I'll go and use curves on top of it. See how the mouth protrudes outwards? From the base of the nose to the top of the chin, you can see that curve of the mouth protruding from the face. A view from below, and by now I hope you can see just how curved the mouth is. Another side view here. Again, if the mouth is open, make sure to trace that shape. Last mouth study here. And like I said earlier, we're going to look at how we can represent teeth. But same stuff still applies here. Just notice how the lips thin out when the mouth is smiling. And so those volumes I talked about earlier will stretch out. You can see how I've sort of flattened out those circular shapes. And so for the teeth, less is more here. I'm thinking of the overall shape of the teeth here rather than each individual tooth. And I'm trying to keep my line weight fairly light. And I'm kind of ignoring the tooth anatomy here, and I think I could have done a better job with these teeth. But the main takeaway here is that you want to think about the overall shape of the teeth, and you want to be selective with your line weight. I really look forward to making a video about shapes and shape design, all that stuff in the future. But if you go on Pinterest and type in how to draw teeth, you should find some good notes. Last facial feature here, the ears. Quite an unusual form, but I break it down like this. The question mark, the Y, and the U, or the valley. Why is there valley ear? Question mark, I don't know. It's common to draw the ear vertical to the head, but really it should be at a slight angle, like you can see here. And in a front view, you'll see the top of the ear hanging over the bottom. And from a back view, you just want to look out for these two shapes. Quick note for those that have studied the skull, the part that I've circled here lines up with the zygomatic. And as you can see here, I'll show you where the question mark, the Y, and the value is, and that angle. And now time to finish out our studies. And to start off with here, I'm looking for the angle of the ears, and then I'm trying to capture the overall shape, and then I'll find the question mark, the Y, and the value. Ears are quite unusual, but I think if you can find the big shape, you should be fine. And to be honest, the ears are usually simplified. Nobody really gets compliments on how they've drawn the ears, unless maybe it's a fantasy head or something. But just get that placement and shape correct, you should be good. Remember the notes about the angle, see if you can see them in the reference. Back view here, like I mentioned earlier, look for those two shapes. And we're at the final stop here. Drawing the ear in these sorts of angles can get quite tricky, but I can still see those shapes, and so that's what I'm relying on. That'll be it for this video. I hope it was useful. If it was, leave a like and sub to see the rest of my head study series. Next time we'll look at the planes of the head and how we can place these features on the head. You can see my creative work on Instagram, which is in the link down below, and I'll see you all in the next one.